I'm here with Igor of Go Ahead and Die to talk about the latest upcoming record, Unhealthy Mechanisms, out October 20th on Nuclear Blast. Thank you once again for taking the time to talk to me about Go Ahead and Die. How's things going with you?
Oh, likewise. Thanks for having me. I'm doing good, just on the road, playing more revisions and Bestial Devastation each night right now. So things are good. Things are good, and very happy to have this new Go Ahead and Die record coming out.
So let me just ask really quick, how's been that experience playing those albums on the road and being part of such an iconic experience?
Oh, it's been amazing. I got to do the re-recording. I got to play bass on the actual album. That was already 2 years ago or so when we recorded it. And yeah, getting to play it live has been amazing. Some of these songs are crazy fast and the riffs are all over the place and it's really intense. We barely stop. It's an hour and a half of just absolute blistering fast stuff. So it's been a real pleasure. It's been amazing.
I can tell by your face and the tone of your voice that you're having a great time. So that's all that it
For
really
sure.
that's all that it really matters. When it comes to Go Ahead and Die and this latest record, first thing I have to ask you is this: you have perhaps all the time in the world to release the debut album, but you have a lot less time and more expectations when it comes to a sophomore record. So was this a more challenging or an easier record for you guys?
To be honest, I think it was a little bit easier than the first one. At least in terms of the writing and the recording process. We knew what we wanted to do. We were building upon the sound and style of the first record, and things just really clicked together really nice for this new one. It was a different writing process. I actually started writing some of it alone while my dad was on tour. So a couple of the tracks I already had completely created by the time he got involved and we started demoing and doing things like that. So we did experiment with new sounds, new song structures and stuff. But anything that was challenging, it was a fun challenge and it was an enjoyable process. In my opinion, this album's a little bit more intense and a little bit crazier and heavier than the first one. And the debut was very well received, so I think any slump that we might have had on this record, I think we overcame and are actually going to exceed everybody's expectations.
I'm going to tell you right now, I like this album a lot more than the debut. Not to say that the debut wasn't good, but this album to me felt that it was hitting on all cylinders. It just felt like a more complete body of work. So knowing what you wanted out of this record, do you also know what you don't want, or you kind of discover things that you don't want as you start the process?
Yeah, I think it's a little mixture of each. You have an idea of what you want, and especially coming into a second record, it's like I felt like we did the debut, and we really went for a 80s sound on that debut one. It was kind of like a Scott Burns mix. And the crazy thing about those is, in terms of production, they're not actually intended to have great production to be in that style. Even listening to some of the old Scott Burns records, they're not necessarily immaculate. They're definitely not perfect sounding records, and that was what we went for on the first one. So yeah, it's one of those things. You make one record and then you're kind of like, okay, let's maybe clean up the drums a little bit on this next one. Let's go a little bit different with the vocals. And I'm sure going into a third record, we're going to be like, okay, we did this on the last one. Let's try something new now. And, each one is a learning experience, and each one is going to teach you new tricks and teach you new things that you didn't think of. And yeah, it's just kind of a building process. You get the first record out and then you're kind of like, all right, let's try this on the next one, and then let's try this on the next one, and all of a sudden each one has their personality, their individuality. And yeah, I think this record came down to, we knew what we wanted and we knew what we didn't want, and we went to great lengths to execute it. And the proof is in the album. If you listen to it, you'll hear it.
And you mentioned mixing and production, which I think it's two really key ingredients of this record. You also mentioned about how the drums. I felt like this album definitely cleaned things up a little bit more on the drums and even on the bass. And I'll ask you more about the bass work, because I thought this album had incredible bass, subtle but incredible bass work throughout. But the guitar still had a lot of fuzz. It still had a lot of noise in them. That approach. Do you need the drums to be a little bit more clear, for lack of a better word, in order for the guitars to really feel that dissonant and still allow the overall sound to work together?
Yeah, I think the drums were a very important thing to the production of this record and what sets it apart from the first one. Because this album, it still has the songwriting and the riffs, the inspiration of the 80s sound, the old school death metal and hardcore punk and crust punk and things like that. But yeah, we wanted to get the drums a little clearer so that things punched a little bit harder, and and like you were saying, it made the bass pop a little bit more in certain parts, and it made things a little more interesting. So like I said, it's one of those things where we did that on this record. When it comes time for the next one, we might change things around again and try new ideas and experiment with new sounds. Not to mention we had a different drummer on this record. The Zach who had played on the first one, the scheduling just didn't end up working out with him. So we actually ended up using a good friend of mine, Johnny Baez, who he also plays in my band Healing Magic. He plays in Black Braid. He plays in a lot of different bands, and he's a great drummer. They're both great drummers, but different styles and different sounds. And yeah, this one, it was trying to find that balance between the fuzz and the chaos and the dissonant chords and things like that, while simultaneously being able to hear everything that's going on and being able to appreciate the drums, appreciate those blast beats and things like that without everything turning muddy. It was definitely a experience.
Let's talk about the bass, because I honestly felt like this record really had a great bass sound, great tonality, very subtle, but it's subtle, but it's very impactful, because I don't think you can have that connection between the drums and how dissonant the guitars are at times without the bass really becoming the bridge in between. Having that much room and having that much freedom with your bass sound on this record, does that make you push the needle even further with future albums?
Oh, definitely. And I think a big thing that comes down to it is I had a little bit more time to come up with the bass lines for this record. We didn't really spend as much time coming up with bass on the first one. It was a little bit more just following the guitars and things like that. And yeah, on this one I think we toned back the fuzz and dirtiness of the bass as well. That was something that we tried so that we could get the guitars a little bit nastier, because it's all a balance thing. It's if you make the bass very, very dirty, just like the guitars, they're gonna kind of bleed together. Whereas if the bass is a little bit cleaner, you get this dynamic range. It complements the drums and the crunching chainsaw guitars a little bit more. And yeah, like I said, I like to look at each album as its own identity and each album to have its own personality. So, going forward, yeah, the next one could be different. The next one could have a new approach, a new sound, new noises, new things, new effects. And that's something that we're kind of constantly working on and constantly coming up with, to keep things interesting. We don't want people to be able to expect what's going to come next. We want it to be a surprise. We want it to catch certain people off guard, and I think a big part of that is just trying different things. And yeah, particularly with bass, we try to have more bass lines. We try to have more parts where it complements the guitar riffs rather than just playing the guitar riffs. And yeah, like I said, all in all, I feel like some of the choices we made for this record are really going to shine and really going to stand out. And people will be able to see the progression of albums and production and everything like that.
Another great thing about the bass is that the more I heard the album, the more noticeable it became. So the first time you listen to the record, you're not paying as much attention to it. The second time you start noticing it more, and with every single time you play it, you start to feel it a little bit more. It's almost like it comes more through the mix with every playing time, which is kind of ridiculous because obviously nothing has changed from the first time to the 10th time. But it kind of gave me that perception. It becomes a little bit more natural to your ears. You're able to pick it up a little bit better.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing of subtlety, you know, and that's definitely something that we've experimented with on this record. You know, even with some of just the noise parts and the interludes and intros and things like that. You know, the first time you hear it, there's a lot going on. You know, it's a bit chaotic at parts intentionally. You know, but yeah, you know, and it happens very fast. It's a very fast paced album the whole way through. So yeah, there's a lot of things you might not pick up until your third or fourth listen. But to me, that's cool, you know, because it keeps people's attention. It keeps people interested in the record, and you know, it's something that I like about older records. You know, there's albums that I love, you know, that I've heard 100 times, and randomly I will pick something up that I never noticed before. So you know, that was something that was really cool to do on these records, is to have some of those subtleties and to have some of those you know, some of those noises and sounds and riffs that people might not even notice the first time around, but you give it more listens, you become familiar with the songs, you start to notice these things, you know, like bass lines and intros and things like that that you probably didn't notice. And I think that's cool. You know, I want people to dissect this record a little bit and go down the rabbit hole on it.
Now, the sound, as you mentioned, the sound is growing as the band progresses. Every record is going to have its uniquenesses. But from a lyrical standpoint, the albums are very intertwined with one another. Considering the craziness of the world that we live in, does this world provide you with enough material for lyrics for years to come?
Oh, constantly. You know, there's all you have to do is turn on the news, and you can see some dark dystopian stuff happening all over the world. You know, but with this record, Unhealthy Mechanisms, it was a little more personal. It dived into mental health a lot, and you know, particularly the decline of mental health, and the, you know, even the title comes from the unhealthy ways that we deal with our thoughts and deal with our emotions and things like that. And you know, for me, it was a very personal record. You know, it dived into my own feelings of anger, anxiety, depression, loneliness, things like that. You know, that was sort of the central focus of this record. And you know, it was a bit less political than the first record. You know, the first record we did in 2020, which was you know, during COVID and the George Floyd incident, and it was an election year, and all these political things were going on. You know, with the second record, we dived a little bit more into psychology and mental health, and you know, the dark parts of our mind. You know, but I think it's cool, you know, because they do sort of fit together, and they do sort of tie together nicely. And it's also very cool that each album has its identity and personality, not only in the music but also in the lyrics as well.
Reliving it every time you play one of the songs, going through that thought process, going through some of those dark moments that exist within us, does that help you better cope with it going forward, or sometimes does it pull you kind of back in a little bit?
No, I think it's a healthy coping thing. You know, for me, it's kind of a reminder that even though I wrote that album in a kind of a dark headspace, you know, that album was the achievement of those feelings. And that album is what I poured those feelings into. And you know, instead of staying depressed and laying on my couch and, you know, crying on the phone to my friends all the time or whatever, you know, I created this album with those feelings instead. And, you know, to me, that gives me a happy feeling, a sense of pride, that I was able to create that in that headspace. Because yeah, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling anxious and a little bit out of your mind, it's hard to create sometimes, and it's hard to have the motivation. So this record will always be kind of a reminder that even if I don't feel good, even if I was struggling with substance and my emotions were all over the place, that I can still create and I can still write and I can still work on things.
What goals do you have for Go Ahead and Die? Do you look on an album by album basis, or do you have, no pun intended, but do you have like a goal where you want the band to reach, that you want to be able to work towards it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a fun band in general, and it's a very expressive, creative band. And I get to work on some of my favorite musical styles. So going forward, yeah, I mean, we really just want to we want to tour more than anything right now. Because we were kind of a pandemic band, we haven't played. We've only played one show as a live band. So for us, in the future, yeah, we want to become a touring band. We want to become a stable functioning machine, basically. And yeah, there's going to be more albums to come and more new crazy ideas. And I'm sure the next one will be a concept as well. And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna just keep building upon this idea that we have. And like I said, the most important thing is to just keep playing and to get out there, to play the States, to get over to Europe, Latin America, maybe Japan and Australia. We want to show people what this band is about and what the live experience is like. And to us, that's what's most important right now.
Well, considering that you have your mom and your dad around you, I think hitting the road and going on tour, it's a totally achievable goal. I've never met two people more driven than them. So they're going to
Yeah,
make sure
definitely.
that they're going to help you get that going. And I hope it happens, because I feel like this band, this sound, these records, they deserve an audience more than just sitting at home and listening to it on your headphones. You want to experience it live. And this kind of brings me to my last question for you. I'm sure you hear this all the time, but I have to ask you this because listening to this album, that immediately popped into my mind. I've talked to your dad a bunch of times. I always talk to him about Nail Bomb, how much that record impacted me as a kid listening to it, and how much I desire for a second Nail Bomb record. When I listened to this album from Go Ahead and Die, I posted on my social media that if for all the fans out there that are dying for a number 2 from Nail Bomb, go pick up this record, because this is what Nail Bomb would sound like if the album was released today. What are your thoughts on that?
Nail Bomb is definitely an influence on Go Ahead and Die. It was a very for that time, it was a mixture of a lot of different up and coming styles and things like that. And that was definitely an influence towards this band. Especially with the crust punk, thrash, death thrash kind of mixture. Nail Bomb was a little bit more industrial inclined, and I would say that's probably the biggest difference between this and between Nail Bomb and Go Ahead and Die. But there's certainly those similar influences. Yeah, it's very raw, it's very aggressive. It's in your face, and it's me and my dad working on things and collaborating and trying to make some of the most brutal stuff we've ever done. And Nail Bomb was a huge influence on that. And Nail Bomb is one of my favorite records that my dad has ever worked on, and Alex Newport from Fudge Tunnel, who was the other half of Nail Bomb, was a huge influence for me as well. So definitely, yeah, I think for fans of Point Blank, they're going to enjoy Go Ahead and Die. Hopefully just as much. It's subtly different, and there's it has its own identity, but it definitely draws inspiration from there. And I think to compare the two is not too far fetched.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, stop bothering your dad about a second release from Neil. Just go listen to this record. Just go buy this
Yep.
record. Stop bothering people about another album. Go listen to this record. You're not gonna regret it. It's a fucking great album, and it scratches that itch. So kudos to you guys for putting out such a powerful album.
Oh, thank you so much. No, it really means a lot to hear that. Thank you.
Oh, man, I love it. I love it every second of it. I think you guys really hit a home run with this one. So congrats to you. Congrats to your dad. Good luck with the rest of the tour. And I hope to see you guys playing this shit live very soon.
All right. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk about it. And I hope we make it your way soon, too.
All right, man. Take care. All the best.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.